Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, we have some new camera angles tonight.
Ooh, I don't know where to look.
I know, this is very confusing,
Huh.
but it's fun.
I don't look any more handsome than I did last week, so.
You don't look any less though. So
Well, apparently I only own 2 shirts according to the intro video, so maybe this was filmed, maybe this is live, maybe this was filmed 4 weeks ago. We don't know.
Yeah.
Just kidding. It's very much live.
Technically, we probably don't look hot enough to say it's live, but it is live. So we are here for Curtis Lake PrimeTime. So glad you could all join us tonight. Did I say something inappropriate already?
Well, wouldn't be the first time.
All right. Well, anyway, so we're here. We're over here at the church, broadcasting this live. So as we're talking through our topics for conversation tonight, you're out there, feel free to chime in. If you're on Facebook, you can comment in the comments section. We'll try to keep an eye on that. If you're on curtislake.online.church, which is our preferred vehicle for you to participate in, you can use the chat window to interact as well. One of these days, we're going to actually be able to take phone calls, like live phone calls.
That's going to be awesome.
And yeah, I don't know how dangerous that's going to be, but
I don't want to be on that first week because I want to prank. I want to prank you.
oh, okay. All right. Well, that's why
We'll have to have some sort of screening
we're going to have a very good call screener so that Sharon can't prank. But so Sharon and Shaina are here with me. Thanks for joining me once again tonight as we do Curtis Lake Primetime. How's your week been?
Hot.
Yeah. Oh, I have 2 air conditioners going right now. Is it too loud for you guys? Can you hear us okay? Hi, Peter Rogers. Yeah, the week's been good. We're going on vacation this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Do you guys have any weekend plans?
I believe the same.
Oh,
Yeah.
ironic.
I don't know if we should be broadcasting this to the world, but I mean, Curtis Lake Church is going to be largely unattended because we have a group of people going camping this weekend.
Jim Schaefer is preaching this weekend.
That's right. Big announcement.
Huge deal.
Jim Schaefer, our pastor of community
Hey,
care. He is making his grand debut.
He's real, huh?
On the big stage. He is a real person. For those of you that thought he was just some artificial intelligence Autobot that we have put in our online sphere, he is an actual real person, a wonderful person.
But speaking of intelligence, I found out this week that Jim has 2 master's degrees. I don't know if you knew that, but he had to travel for the military, and it was going to push back his schooling. So since it was pushing back his schooling, he got his 2nd master's degree in the interim. So maybe he is really artificial intelligence.
I feel like Jim has told me that many, many times.
Oh,
just how many
I just
degrees
found out.
he has. So, and we'll be able to find out just how smart he is, because not only is he preaching on Sunday, but he will be here next Wednesday night. So we'll have an opportunity to critique and, maybe deconstruct some of that message. So that should be a lot of fun. But tonight, we're going to deconstruct this past Sunday's message. If you haven't got a chance to listen to that, then that's available online through our Curtis Lake media area. As well as all these podcasts are available as well, right? You can go back and listen to these. So there's a couple things that we are inviting you to do besides just being the good, awesome people that you are out there. Obviously, we'd love for you to be here Sunday morning as much as possible, either in person or online, and participating with the Sunday worship experience. And then, of course, we're doing this in conjunction with a video series that's available on Right Now Media. And the video series is called Road Trip to Truth. So for the last few weeks, we've been sort of talking some about the message and also spending a little bit of time talking through this video series, some of our comments on it. So really want to encourage you to do that. If you haven't been able to participate in that, the videos are about 20 minutes or so, maybe a little over 20 minutes a piece. They're really good. They're put together very well, and I think have some just good information for us to be thinking about. So, all right, you guys ready to get into it?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
All you out there
excited.
Ready to get into it? Tony Driscoll says, hey. He
jumped over from Facebook, joining the church online platform.
Hey.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure that's
okay.
Tony, could you let us know how you meant to say that?
So Tony's a convert from
Tony
Facebook
made it
to Church Online. Good job, Tony.
Yep, you did it. We have Peter's here, Caleb, Ray. Love seeing all of you guys here. That's so fun.
I feel like we're getting into romper room here. So
Hello,
and I
everyone.
see Tony.
That's creepy.
Yeah, Shaina doesn't know what romper.
I don't know what you just referenced. No, not at all. But no, just to like reiterate what you said, feel free to pop questions in the chat, both on Church Online and Facebook. We have, all of us have it pulled up. So we want to make this as interactive as possible. Like the three of us could talk for hours. You guys know that, but it's fun to have what they're saying and questions. But I really loved how you tackled on Sunday this concept of morality. I feel like it's a tricky one given our culture and our society, but I just really appreciated the biblical view of it and just the illustrations that you used, albeit sometimes messed up. But the lobster trap, right? How we get that was just such a good analogy of how we see something that looks appealing, and so we go after it, and before we realize it, we're stuck, and that what was initially appealing, that bait, is gone because we've consumed it, and then we just can't get out, and the trap, we're ultimately doomed at that point, unless like a fisherman comes and doesn't want us. But I'm a visual learner, so that was really helpful for me. I don't know what you thought, Sharon, but
yeah, what's really interesting about that analogy is you're trapped in there.
Yeah.
There is a way out, though. You just can't do it. Like, you can't figure it out.
It's next to impossible because I actually have gone labstering. Labstering. I went labstering. Fun fact, last time I went, my grandmother put my dog down, but it's okay. But I went lobstering, and sometimes the bait is missing from the trap because the lobster does figure out how to get out. So it's the only problem with that analogy is it's kind of hopeless, right? But there are some lobsters who can figure out how to get out. It's just the large majority really struggle with that. So I think it's just something to be keenly aware of as we're navigating through this life and through, social media and relationships and morality and sexuality, is just understanding how big of a trap it is.
I don't want to take a chance that I'm smart enough to figure it out.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to bank on that.
I'm pretty sure I'm not. So.
Yeah, but I think, and we didn't really talk about this on Sunday, but just using that illustration, the lobster's in the trap, right? And we do that. Like we're ultimately responsible for getting ourselves into all kinds of predicaments.
Right.
And sometimes the only way out of that is something that's beyond us.
Right.
Right. Like the lobsterman. Now the lobsterman is taking the lobster out of the trap for a, particular purpose. That's sale or consumption. But we're like that. We can find ourselves in that helpless state, and God comes in and intervenes. I mean, that's really what salvation is all about, right? It's, hey, we've gotten ourselves into a mess that's bigger than we can actually do, right? There are a lot of people that subscribe to this idea that that being right with God is all about doing the right things, and so long as you do enough of the right things, then you can maintain favor with God, right? That it's kind of scaled that way. That's something that we call a salvation by works. And the Bible's very much against that kind of idea, the fact that we can somehow earn our salvation, that we can make it happen. Salvation is, biblically speaking, it comes by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. It's a gift, right? It's a gift from God, and none of us can earn it, and therefore we have no reason to boast about it. So in that state of just utter helplessness for the ruin that we have created in our own lives, it's there that God swoops in and he saves us, right, through his miraculous power and through what Jesus has done for us on the cross. So
well, and I think too, you have that, and I'm going to keep going with the analogy because it's fun, but you have to wonder if a lobster does escape from the trap, can they communicate in their lobster language, like, hey, don't go there, right? Because we're saved by grace through faith, but also the fruit of our lives is a demonstration of living out of the grace that we've received and the freedom that we've found. And so I think that's where sometimes it can get a little dicey, is when people are like, we're saved by grace through faith, the end. And it's like, no, that's not the end. Then we want to be the lobster who's telling people, don't go down that trap. Here's a better way of living. Here's, to go off so many scriptural analogies of the living water and bread of life. And like, Jesus has so many more precious things to offer that don't lead to a boiling pot. So I think that's an important, thing to look at, as well as it is absolutely, you're saved. The Bible says so clearly, by grace through faith, not by works, so that no one can boast. But also we have to live our lives in a way that honors God and his gift of grace, right? I used to tell students all the time, if somebody gives you a birthday gift and you don't use it, then it was a waste of their money and your space. But if you use it, then it was worth the sacrifice that they made and worth the space in your life. So it's just really important to use the gifts that we've been given.
Yeah. All right, so we try to tackle to some degree this question, which is, how do we determine morality? So Sharon,
I love when you do this to her.
how do you determine morality? I provided 3 major possibilities. One is that we determine morality through just our own individual expression. You know, that is what is true for me is true for me, which may be different from what is true from somebody else, but really ultimately the choice of right and wrong is left to my own individual imagination. Another one is a morality that's developed through some society, which is a group of those individuals, right? A group of people that are able to frame what that society is going to consider to be right and wrong. And we do that, of course, in every society, right? Every society has, it has its line, and it says,
Right.
okay, well, this is wrong. And we see that change constantly. It used to be illegal to grow and sell and use marijuana. Right. And that's changed over a period of time. I mean, same thing with alcohol, right? I mean, there was a time when you couldn't legally purchase and consume alcohol, and the laws changed, and, you know, because society said, no, we want this.
And then it was 18, and then it was 21.
Right,
and
exactly.
There's so many.
Right, but that's a perfect illustration of how we write these, we draw these lines. We say, you know what? Yeah, there's no problem with a person consuming alcohol. We're not going to make that illegal, but we are going to make it illegal for a 16-year-old to do that. Right? The line's at 21. So you're 20 years old and 360 days. Listen, you're not there yet. You got 5 more days to go before you can legally consume this thing. So we're constantly in a society drawing those lines, and you will see the rules different, you know, from one society to another, which I think creates problems, right? Because we have seen, and we do see in the world today, we have societies that consider their framework of morality that would just absolutely blow our minds away. You know, there's a society that says it's okay for us to exterminate this category of people, for instance.
Right.
Right? Like, that happens.
Yeah.
That is happening. And we would say, no, well, you can't do that. That's racist, or that's morally reprehensible. And well, how do you determine that, right? So you have the question of whether societies can determine morals for themselves, and we see some of the trouble that we can get into there. And then the third option is that morality is ultimately defined by something that is completely above and outside of us. It's outside of me as an individual. It's outside of the collection of individuals called society. It's determined by something other than that. And that, therefore, is not subject to the same kind of fluidity. You know, as time goes on and culture changes, you know, the standards for morality are ultimately saying, obviously that's the view that the Bible would promote and have us adhere to, the fact that God is the one who's the ultimate arbiter of right and wrong.
Well, I definitely lean towards that last option.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
Since you work here.
Yes. But there's a little bit of, I think, I mean, it gets a little tricky, because there's a little bit of that second option, because I'm largely surrounded by people who are influenced by the Bible. And so influenced, not necessarily 100%, depending on, well, I'm not talking about you, Josh, or you, Shaina, but, you know, like, it's, there are some guidelines and rules, if you will, that are shaped by the community that I surround myself with.
Yeah.
I definitely lean against or away from the first option, because I know that typically, if I'm trying to make my own rules or, laws for morality, it's because I know that they are contrary to existing laws, rules, and I'm just doing it for selfish reasons. Like I'm not smart enough to make my own rules, to think of what's. I can't be that judge because I know my own heart.
So I think, and I may have referenced this on a previous podcast, but I did some research a while back on, kind of the concept of the different laws in Scripture, right? Because it's, how do we know what Scriptures still apply to us, in that conversation. And so I think it's interesting that there are different types of rules that apply to different situations, right? Like not every rule is a moral rule, or not every, kind of cultural component is moral.
Sure.
Right? It can be civil. Like in the U.S., we drive on the right side of the road, but in other countries, they drive on the left side of the road. And that's part of their civil understanding of how their culture operates. That's not a moral issue. So I think we have to be really careful to maintain our stance on biblical morality, which I know you're not suggesting we don't, but maintain our stance on biblical morality while understanding that there are rules of society that will differ from place to place and culture to culture that are non-moral issues. I heard this great sermon by a pastor named Ben Stewart years ago, and it was all on how do we as a church tackle these non-moral issues, right? And it was just really phenomenal on how it's okay to have differences of opinions on things, but we need to know where we stand firm as well. So I think that's really important.
Well, I think sometimes we also make a judgment on other people's morality. Here's an example. So there are countries where it is perfectly legal. Prostitution is perfectly legal.
Yeah.
And it's not, from what I understand, it's not because they have no issues with prostitution. It's that they feel legalizing it reduces some stigma, and it just doesn't make it as appealing because, sin is appealing.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah, I mean, right, like, was it when alcohol was illegal, it was
Right.
the speakeasies and everything like that. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And that's the
right.
same kind of thing. So, I grew up in a fairly judgmental environment in, the church that I grew up in, and they don't necessarily see some of those they make judgments on morality when it might not really have been a moral issue or a reason.
Right. Yeah, that's why I really appreciated the sermon, because it was like, let's talk about the things that are non-moral. Still important,
right,
but non-moral.
Yes.
I think, and to go back kind of, Josh, to what you were saying about, the sanctity of life and how people value lives over another. The Right Now Media series, it looked at the idea of social Darwinism, right? And this idea of evolution and how we got here as a society. And, was it intentional design or was it random happenstance? And one of the things that they warned against with social Darwinism is just the danger of racism and sexism that comes out of that. Because, Hitler was an evolutionist. He believed in whatever that is. Darwinian evolution, there's the word. And because of that, he saw this group of people that was superior because they had, quote unquote, evolved more than another several races, genders, the whole 9 yards. And that led to this horrible atrocity that is the Holocaust. And so it's just it's scary what can happen when we lose sight of, I love the video. It said, in our Christian worldview, there's one race. That is the human race. And I just love that statement of, we're going to love people really well. And the color of your skin should not determine how much value you have. You should have intrinsic value because you're made in the image of God. I just think that's beautiful.
I thought it was a very interesting way to look at things, too. There you were, on the video, they were talking about how if you're being kind to someone.
Yes.
That's.
I wrote that down, too.
You can't be an evolutionist.
Natural selection, right?
And want to be kind to someone to help someone out. I have a special needs child. my family can function because there are people that are just so kind and
Right.
helpful.
Yeah.
And, natural selection says,
Survival of the
"Yeah, Matthew,
fittest.
see you
Yeah.
later."
To
you're
each
not
his
gonna
own.
make it,
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really, really interesting point that, you really can't have it both ways. Because a lot of times we see that, or it seems to me that people that fall in the evolution camp are also very big social justice people.
Yes.
You know,
huge. And it doesn't make sense. There's just a breakdown. Not that
Yes.
it doesn't make sense. There's just a breakdown, right?
Right.
Of like if you believe that natural selection is how we got here, why are you helping someone else? Well, we're helping someone else ultimately because we're made in the image of God and God is love and God loves people. But then the denial of God's existence and presence is just, that's where the breakdown happens, right? Is like, we are created in the image of God. God is love. But if we believe in this, random happenstance of creation, then where did our natural tendency to care for others come from? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I imagine they would say that that is an evolution of mankind, growing in its understanding for and empathy for others that actually allows it to operate even outside of, the process of natural selection. But I mean, I don't really know how to make a case for that. I don't subscribe to it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's interesting talking about this idea of like how we develop morality socially. You mentioned Nazi Germany. Sharon mentioned how countries have different laws regarding prostitution. Interestingly, our text from Sunday kind of looked at that, right? I mean, that was sort of the angle that I was taking, was that you have in that text, you have these two adults that are consenting to do something with each other that is not necessarily or directly going to hurt another human being, and yet there's this very, very stern warning against it, right? And of course, we understand that when it comes to sexuality, that the Bible does have a framework for how that sexuality is expressed. Now, today, I think most people would probably try to make the case that, hey, well, listen, if you could legalize prostitution and provide the safeguards necessary for that activity to take place where people aren't being victimized like they often are, then why wouldn't you? As you're wanting to have this high level of libertarian society where adults get to make the choices they want to make, I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you allow for a person to practice that profession? Why would you not allow another person to leverage those services? And currently we're still at a place where we say, no, we don't want that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd make the case that pornography is a close cousin to that, right? Because you have in that industry, you have a tremendous amount of victimization that happens. Like, so many people think that pornography is it's a media with no victims, right? Or largely, this is private stuff for individuals or for couples to leverage and use as they want. And what's wrong with that, right? And it's perfectly natural for somebody to explore their sexuality with such a media. Nicole was here with us a handful of weeks ago talking about some of the work that her organization does, and I love what she said. Like, stop buying sex, right? And specifically for in America, I mean, that's a big part of it, because there are victims. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of victimization that takes place. Yeah. Sometimes what's very obvious victimization, then also what is maybe not quite so obvious, and that all comes out of our desire to push an agenda that says, hey, I want to do what I want to do, and I don't want to have any of these restraints. But those things come with incredible costs.
Well, and I think it was Doris. I think it might have been a conversation that we had when we were just having dinner together. And or it may have been here, but she was talking about how the pandemic has caused so many children to be forced into selling, like parents selling their children for child pornography, child prostitution, because that was the only way they could put food on the table. And that only exists because there's a demand for it. Right. And that's just the heartbreaking reality. Is so often, you know, we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to hear about it, but it's a lot of it is children being victimized. And, you know, you may say like, oh, well, a consenting adult can do whatever they want. But like, what happens when it's the kid? Like, that's the family's only need for food, and they're getting it because there's such a high demand for it. Like, you can't tell me that they're not victims in that situation.
Well, and I would make an argument that consenting adults are
often
sometimes
desperate,
not really consenting.
Right.
They're in denial. They're, just
or they're
they don't
desperate for food as well.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of reasons.
Yeah. So we talked about choice. Like, where does choice come from? Where do we stand on that? We talked about the Bible presents us with these two, I don't know if I'd say competing, but these two very different things that we hold in some tension, and depending on where you balance that tension can give you a different kind of worldview. But it's one of them is God's sovereignty, and the other one is man's free will. So if you subscribe to a framework of that God created the world and the universe, you deal with those two kinds of things. Obviously, if you don't believe that God exists or that he has any responsibility, that there's not a personal creator responsible for all of this, we kind of talked about, well, what does choice look like in those various contexts? So how do you understand choice? Do we actually have free will, or do we just have the appearance of choice?
So, and I may be wrong, and feel free to correct me in this. This is my understanding of it, right? Is that I think God knows us so intimately that he knows our heart's desire, but still allows us to make the choice that our heart desires. Does that make sense? So like, I could offer Sharon, or I could offer you white chocolate and dark chocolate. Now I know you're going to choose the dark chocolate because you think white chocolate is trash, but I'm still giving you the choice, right? And so I think in God's sovereignty, he offers us what's best, but in the concept of free will, he allows us to choose which of the two we want. That's just the best way I've been able to understand it and kind of grasp this concept, because it is a difficult one to grasp. It's a very highly debated topic, and I'd love to hear what people online are thinking on this, because I think it's an important one to have dialogue, as Magnus would say, about.
Yeah. So I mean, remove God from the equation, and you have like what we talked about, is that our choices are essentially just some natural byproduct of a lot of random opportunities. So a person makes choices because of where they were born and who they were born to, what is their economic status, what is their level of education, what is their environment like, what their DNA, right? Like what, just how I was born. I was born with some predispositions toward things. I am predisposed to burning up when I go outside and the sun's out, right? Other people are not. Other people can be outside and it doesn't bother them all. I just like immediately catch fire.
That's why you and I look very red on this podcast, and Sharon has a beautiful tan, because we are very, very pale. She has the olive complexion.
Yeah, but I mean, and we have other predispositions that ultimately help frame our personality and play into the tendency of the choices that we make, right? So we do all have that. We know that environment is a major part and major contributor to these things, but with God out of the equation, it's like, well, that is the thing. And so it almost comes down and is reduced to just what looks like an appearance of choice, right? We talked about that Sunday, how a person make bad decision after bad decision after bad decision because, well, why wouldn't they? Right? That's how we, as a society, that's how we tend to look at things now. And so we're more and more just pulling away from a person's individual responsibility.
Yeah.
And their accountability for the choices that they make. Because, again, if given the same set of circumstances, you would make that same choice too, right?
Well,
you wouldn't have, like, when I hear that, it's like, oh, so we don't actually have choices.
Yeah.
The decisions I make, to hold a job and to work hard, and to take care of my family and to eat certain things and to, participate in certain hobbies. Those are just byproducts of those things that I'm predisposed to and the environment that I grew up in. I mean, I would personally say from my experience, no. I mean, I've made a lot of choices in my life that were intentionally deviant from some of the experiences I had. Like I said, I don't want that. Like I experienced this as a kid or whatever growing up. It's like, I don't want that. And so I make different choices. And some of those choices have been good and some of those choices have been really bad. And for both, there are consequences to those.
When I'm a twin.
I always
We were
forget that.
raised- Well, yeah, we look a lot alike.
It's just, it's really, really, really hard to constantly live with the idea that there's two
Sharons.
there.
Pretty great, huh?
It's a little terrifying.
You have,
Well, if we lose this Sharon, we can just go get the other one, I guess.
anyway, we were, raised. We are, identical twins. We're raised in the same family. Very small town, so we're in the same classrooms. Like, we came up in the same circumstances, and yet we didn't always make the same choices. So it's not just about your environment and how you're built, because I'm built like somebody else, and
Right.
we make different choices.
So if we were to list those all out, like who made the better choices?
Oh, me.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, sure.
All right. Well, we have to get this out
Said
to your
Sharon.
sister. Yeah. See if she agrees with. Do you think she would agree with that?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Well, and I like too how the Right Now Media video referenced Romans 1:18-20, and I have the New International Version, NIV, going old school here, but I have NLT pulled up too, but it says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. What a statement. Suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. And that line of they suppress the truth by their wickedness, followed by so that people are without excuse, seems so like we don't have an excuse, but we do it anyways. And we make the excuse anyways. It's like when you catch someone red-handed and they're like, it wasn't me. Well, I just saw you do it. Whether that's something big or small.
Well, that's your truth, Shaina.
That's my, right? Oh my gosh. No, but it's true. Like, just toddlers, they're great for things. But if Cam says, the other day, I feel like I talk about potty training a lot. Sorry. But the other day, Cam is potty training and his pants are soaked. And I'm like, Cam, did you have an accident? He's like, no.
I did it on purpose.
Yeah. Probably true. But
Why is my mom
Yeah.
asking such
Then
a
he told me-
Which would not be as weird as Cooper did it. Right? If he tried to blame his brother
True.
for it.
But then he says, hours later, he has another accident because we're just struggling in this department right now. And he says, no, I got wet outside. He hadn't been outside playing in water since like 3 changes ago. Yet at 3 years old, he's reverting to this suppressing the truth to not get in trouble. to hide his mistake at 3 years old. Like, how much more do we do that at 30 years old? Or, I won't.
Sounds like he's reached the age of accountability. You better.
I know, we gotta
baptized.
teach him about Jesus. He knows the story of Jonah, so I'm hoping that'll be a good
that should do
segue.
it. Yeah. Do you want to get stuck in the belly of
The
a
big fish. Yeah.
That's great.
But
great parenting, Shaina.
I, do my best. You can pray for us. But yeah, it's just, sometimes I feel like people say the Bible is so hard to understand. Then you read a passage like that and you're like, oh, oops.
Yeah. So if you haven't caught it, the series Road Trip to Truth this 4th week started talking about Darwinian evolution. Brought out the fact that, like, we understand, evolution is the process of change that takes place over time. But the theory of Darwinian evolution, what we have come to really kind of understand as evolution, and many of us were taught it in schools. They still continue to teach it in schools. Is the prevailing theory that allegedly has the scientific backing behind it to say, well, this is how we got to where we are. This is how you explain the complexity of life. So if you haven't watched the video, I think you really would like to. And Shaina already kind of brought this out from Romans. And I think one of the important things for us to understand is that, at least from my perspective, there's a spiritual reason why we want an evolution that removes God as a necessary being for creation. There's a spiritual reason why we want that as the world, right? As the population of the world. And that is because whenever you bring God into the mix of having, first of all, the responsibility of creating everything that is, and with that, the conclusion that follows that we are now accountable to him, well, then now you have accountability built into your life. And
who wants that?
We don't want that, right? Like, the reality is we don't want restraint. So we're talking about something like sexual immorality,
Right.
And every other kind of immorality that we could think of. We don't want restraints on our behavior, right? We don't want people telling us what we're supposed to do. We certainly don't want, some ancient set of writings dictating for us what is right and wrong. And so there is, and always has been from the beginning, there has always been this movement to try to remove God, right? Like, get him out of our minds. And that's exactly, I think, what Paul's tackling in Romans 1, that what we have done as human beings is we have rejected what is right in front of us. We have rejected the evidence that stands very, very clearly right in front of us, and in fact, for everybody to see, so that we suppress the truth and exchange it for a lie.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. I mean, you think, well, who would want to do that? And yet we do. I mean, everybody does it. People that don't believe in God do it. People that are followers of Jesus from time to time will do it as well, right? I mean, we always are looking to suppress the truth in an area that we don't want to change in, or that we don't want to have restraints over. So
Yeah, and in the video, there's I think it's Aldous Huxley. I don't know what his whatever Huxley. Watch the video. He said, this quote was in there: "The philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation. The liberation we desired was from a certain system of morality. We objected to the morality because it interfered with our sexual freedom." We don't want to be told what to do in any area of our life. And so this idea of evolution, this idea of anything goes, this idea of there's no higher power, gives us the freedom to do whatever the heck we want. But we all know that given and left to our own devices, there's hurt, there's pain, there's neglect, there's abuse, there's abandonment, there's hatred. I mean, we are sinful beings. Look at the Holocaust. Look at, is it Darfur? I think there was another genocide there. Like, there's so much brokenness in the world, but we think it'll lead to our freedom. We think it'll lead to, like, that lobster, that treat, but it really is just so destructive.
Well, we don't take it as far as a lot of people, right? So we're not to that extreme. So we can still have God in our lives and believe in a creator.
Yeah.
And have our way too, because the way I'm straying here
on the scale
does
of bad
not compare to Hitler.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I feel like Christians are really good at scaling our badness, scaling our sin. And obviously scripture speaks to that, but, well, I'm not doing as bad. I'm not killing people. It's like, have you read that the Bible says if you look lustfully at someone, it's like you've committed adultery, or if you've had a hatred, thought of hatred towards someone? But we're just really good at justifying. We're really good at justifying. I feel like these conversations it's easy to feel like we're pointing fingers, but I think it's important to also acknowledge, like, we all struggle with this. It's fair to say we're collectively control freaks. At least the two on this side of the table are. We like control.
We do. It's going to be our downfall, Shaina.
Oh, she switched the camera right with Josh's face. Was a good one. But shout out to Sydney producing tonight. But yeah, it's anytime that things are out of our control, we buck against it.
Well, it's our perception of control is so much more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, because if it's up to us. But then that's the other side of it, is there's so much anxiety in that.
Yeah.
So it really is all these things that we think are going to be so freeing and liberating. Every angle that you look at it from, there's anxiety and frustration and panic, and it just never is what we want it to be.
Right.
But I feel like we never learn.
Yeah. No, sin ultimately comes with pain.
Always.
Right? Like, it comes with the consequence of pain that follows it. And that's, like, largely that's why it's sin.
Yeah.
It's not like God has just arbitrarily set up, this framework of things that is like basically like a maze that you put mice into with cheese at the end. It's like, all right, well, good luck finding it. And there's no real reason why the route goes this way or that way. It's just the walls were just arbitrarily set up here, and you have to find out how to navigate your way through that. Like, that's not the concept of morality. Morality is all about God establishing an order that says, this is how my human beings, if they will listen to me, this is how they will flourish. This is how they will do the best for themselves. And our deviating from that is, yes, it's an offense to God, but it's an offense to God, especially in the sense that it is an offense to what he has created, to the order he has created, to the order of one another, right? That, my sin is an offense and a hurt to somebody else. And, that's the problem with this idea of consenting adults. A lot of times is you think you have consenting adults, and there's no real thought for the consequences that come with that. But let's be honest, like, if we're talking about sexual promiscuity, for instance, and you think you have a couple 17-year-old kids or a couple 21-year-old adults that are having casual sex with each other, and the girl gets pregnant, like, there's some serious ramifications to that.
Yeah, huge.
Right? There's probably going to be, some level of pain and hurt that's going to arise from that, regardless of what road that person chooses to go down. She tries to abandon the pregnancy through abortion. I mean, we're lying to ourselves if we say that there aren't some serious psychological and emotional repercussions that come out of that. I mean, countless women have testified to that. Never mind the fact that if you hold to the fact that the unborn is still human life with value in God's eyes, you know, there's loss there as well. If she doesn't decide to terminate her pregnancy and she goes down the road of bringing this baby into the world under not the most ideal circumstances, like that's going to be a tough start to life for the child. It's going to be a tough road to hoe for that mom and perhaps that dad if he sticks around. You know what I mean? Like, like those things. But the way God set up the family and said, hey, when a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife and they create this thing called the committed family, like that's a perfect place for reproduction to take place. That's a perfect place for a family to ultimately experience its best chance at flourishing. It's not that, listen, my mom wasn't married when I was born, you know, I mean, and she was a teenager, and that came with a lot of incredible challenges for her, you know, challenges ultimately for me, probably far more. Like she probably experienced the lion's share, just pain and hurt and difficulty and challenge for that. And you know, like that's the byproduct of choices that we make.
And I think it's also important to note, I feel like I always go to the other side too, but I think it's just important to note that it's not that there can't be redemption in, you know, the choices that are made, like those that could lead to hurt. Like God obviously is using you, right? And has totally like brought so much into your life because you're trusting him. And the same is to be said about a family. Like, yes, that is ultimately God's design for a family unit, but there can be brokenness if we're not seeking him in that. And so choices made on our own humanity often lead to brokenness, right? Regardless of if it's set up to look perfect or not. But the thing that brings hope, restoration, healing, and, you know, ultimately hope out of all of it is the decision to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, right? Because even if there's a, you know, this quote unquote perfect family structure that's great for reproducing, right? Like, you know, there can be a breakdown there if there's not a dedication of lives to the Lord. So I think that's just the important thing to note in all of this is, you know, because I'm sure that we have a lot of people listening who maybe have a similar story to you, or, you know, have been a part of a family that was together and there's been divorce or there's been, you know, brokenness there, and it's God can totally redeem that. It's just we have to also make the choice.
Right.
Like we may have made some bad choices, but we have to make the choice to follow him. He doesn't force that on us.
Yeah, that's
so I think it's the redemption is so beautiful.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the gospel message, right? Is that God takes our brokenness, and he bandages up the brokenhearted, and he brings healing into our lives, and does. Yes, I mean he redeems what was doomed for loss and destruction, and he is able to breathe life into that which was dead, and that's the beauty of the gospel.
It's so funny
but what we want to do is like we want to persist in, like, just don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
Yeah, I think it's funny that, just to kind of recap all that we've been talking about, right, is in our selfishness, we chase things that think will give us freedom, but they lead to brokenness. But God is taking the brokenness and giving us freedom.
Yeah.
It's just a cool,
Absolutely.
kind of way to sum it up, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, if you haven't had a chance to watch the videos, go ahead and do that. But I think that's a good place for us to end tonight. Unless you guys have any other closing comments or things that you want to talk about or advertise.
Just shout out for Jim on Sunday.
Yeah.
He's going to kill it. If you're in the area, if you have Wi-Fi, get on. I'm so excited.
Or just come to the church.
Well, right.
If you're in the area.
If you're in the area, come to church.
You can do that too.
You can do that too. Yeah. It's a thing. And we have air conditioning.
Right.
No.
Oh, Sharon, you want to talk about
I
the story?
do, I
the
do.
story wall.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
You
why
know,
don't you take us home on
I
that?
would really love it if you would share a bit of yourselves with the rest of Curtis Lake. So we have a wall that we're naming, I don't know, this is Curtis Lake or the
My
Curtis Lake
Curtis
Story
Lake
Wall?
Story.
Mhm.
I gotta know what we want to name it.
What's your
We'll
Curtis
figure it
Lake
out.
story?
But yeah, what is your Curtis Lake story? And we're not looking necessarily for how you came to be at Curtis Lake or your faith journey. Just some story of connection, something that's meaningful to you, something that maybe you have a connection with a specific person. That person, you know, maybe invited you to church, or maybe there's this funny story. This, you know, when I think of Curtis Lake, this is the story that pops into my head. You know, I will never forget this moment. Something like that.
So, Sharon, what is your Curtis Lake story in 60 seconds?
So my Curtis Lake story, I actually, it was in the program last week, and so you can actually go on the website and look at the program and scan the QR code and read it. But I have a package of bingo cards, and those bingo cards represent Curtis Lake camping trips for July 4th. And Shaina's been on them for many years. She was just a little girl when, you know, she started camping with us too.
Not too long ago.
And yeah, not too long ago. But, and there's plenty of stories from Shaina, and you actually heard them
Last week.
last week. But one of the things that we did there was we played candy bar bingo. And so every year, even now, adults will play. It's just a lot of fun. But this camping trip,
Which, in just full disclosure, is gambling
Oh, gosh.
that Sharon is sponsoring among our young people. So, anyway, proceed.
thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
You ruined bingo for me.
He's okay. He's okay with it as long as there's dark chocolate in the mix.
That's right.
Not Hershey's though. Only Dove.
So we play, we have fun, and it's just a special time. Camping is not. It's July 4th camping is very special to my family, and we've been doing it for 24 years, I think, and it's just it's a highlight. I'm with my family. You know, I'm only related to the people that are in my camper, but I'm with my family, and that's you know, it's very precious to me. So that's my story. I would love to hear your story. If you need any ideas on what to submit, you know, for, you know, the item that represents your story, I would be happy to brainstorm those with you. The more interesting, the better. We want to capture people's eyes as they're walking through the lobby. And hey, what does that have to do with somebody here at Curtis Lake? And then when you scan the QR code, you're taken to the story, and you're taken to the picture of the person that item belongs to. And so you get to know somebody else, even just a little bit, but you can put a face with a name, and you know, now you can introduce yourself and say, hey, I love your story.
Find them and ask them more details about their story.
How do I play bingo? Where do I get those bingo cards?
How do I play
Haven't
bingo?
shared.
If you have to ask that, Sharon's the person to give you the answer.
That's right.
She is. All right,
right.
great. Thank you so much. That was awesome. For being here tonight. Thank you, Sydney, for producing the other side of the room. So we'll see you all. Well, see some of you on Sunday, and hope to see you again next Wednesday night for Curtis Lake Prime Time. Have a great night. Have a great week.
Bye.